When astronauts will make their way to the moon and beyond, things will look a little different. Elements of the most powerful rocket in the world are being assembled and tested here in Mississippi for America's return to the moon. 16 WAPT's Troy Johnson takes an in-depth look at the Stennis space impact, starting with the development and testing of the engines that will power NASA's next missions into space, Troy.
Yeah, Megan, I spent a couple of days in Hancock County learning how the engines are tested and what they're planning for future space exploration. I learned a lot, including how the most powerful rocket in the world works.
0 and liftoff.
Americans have been traveling into space for 60 years.
Engines now revving up, standing by for the throttle up call.
But much of the work to get there
359
starts here in Mississippi. The key parts of NASA's Space Launch System, or SLS,
we shipped this engine over to Mizzou. They
are being built and tested right here at Stennis Space Center in Hancock County. Stennis has been at the center of America's development of space vehicles since the Apollo missions. The center's B-2 stand was used to test the Saturn V rocket stages that took Americans to the moon. And all of the space shuttle's main engines were tested here through the entire 34 years of the program. Up next, those RS-25 engines, with all their history and now added technology, will power the Artemis missions into space with more than 2 million pounds of thrust.
So this engine has flown into space. What we are doing with this engine at this point is we're repurposing it, modifying it, adding, we added some additional propulsion power to it.
Michael McDaniel is with Aerojet Rocketdyne. They're refitting and upgrading the RS-25 engine and making it part of the most powerful rocket in the world.
It means is we've added about 40,000 pounds of more thrust to them. We've taken about 40% cost out of them.
4 of the RS-25s will be arranged at the bottom of the SLS, which is also fitted with 2 solid rocket boosters. The 212-foot tall core stage and upper stage are topped with the Orion crew vehicle. 3 Artemis missions are set. Artemis 1 is an uncrewed flight that will test the Space Launch System and Orion spacecraft together. It's set to launch later this year. Artemis 2 will be a mission with a crew, sending astronauts into orbit around the moon and also the furthest point humans have flown into outer space. In 2024, Artemis 3 will fly.
And then this one is going to put the first woman and the next man on the moon.
But before all that happens, back here in Mississippi, the massive core stage was tested earlier this year with a hot fire green run at the B-Test complex. And engines are still being tested.
This is the A1 test facility. That is one of the RS-25 engines that you got to see this morning in the assembly building. Transported here on a truck. We lift it up, install it into the test stand with a crane. It's put into this test position. This is an engine deck here, so this engine deck will roll back, and below us, far below that engine deck down below, there's a flame deflector.
15 engines from the shuttle program will power the first 4 missions of Artemis, along with one very special engine to the people at Stennis.
This engine, 2063, was built at Stennis facilities, Mississippi labor employees, Mississippi paperwork, planning. We tested, we assembled it here, tested on the test stand, flight certified, tested the first time through, and that engine is going to be on Artemis 2, carrying the first humans on the Artemis mission.
Now, the next generation of those engines will all be built here in Mississippi, and they'll be created with state-of-the-art manufacturing techniques, including 3D printing. Tomorrow night, we take a look at Stennis Space Center's role in upcoming NASA missions to the moon. Troy Johnson, 16 WAPT News.
All this week, we're telling you about the role the Stennis Space Center in Mississippi is playing in America's space exploration. 16 WAPT's Troy Johnson got a close-up look at what's happening at Stennis, and tonight he reports on the Magnolia State's role in upcoming NASA missions to the moon.
To infinity and beyond. Keegan and Megan, you've heard that before, right? It is a familiar catchphrase, but it could soon be true as we have our sights set on the moon, Mars, and more. And it's all thanks to the work they're putting in at Stennis.
We'd like to dedicate the first step of Apollo 17 to all those who made it possible.
The last time Americans set foot on the moon was 1972, 49 years ago. But Apollo 17 won't be the last mission. The Artemis 3 mission will launch in 2024 and will land the first woman on the moon and the first person of color. The engines for Artemis missions are being tested in Hancock County. Astronaut Butch Wilmore says there's only one way to describe the people working on them at Stennis.
If I could do it in one word, it'd be passion. They just passionate about what they do, passionate about human spaceflight. Because in this business, the phrase has been coined, it's not forgiving. You know, failure is not an option.
Artemis will send astronauts deeper into space than ever before. They will explore more of the lunar surface and set up a lunar outpost orbiting the moon, setting the stage for the journey to Mars. The development of NASA's Space Launch System will power those missions. The Space Administration's use of heritage engines, the attention to detail,
They can go.
Yep.
Missing tool.
and accountability that's demanded are just part of the mission.
Can't do our job until that part's on that board. So I got to drive from home out here to put the part back on the board so they can go to work.
The people working to make it all come together say it's always been much deeper than that.
When they were flying, during the shuttle program, there's 7 astronauts in the shuttle. We think of 7 families on those shuttles, and so those, it's a human. And so now this will have 2 astronauts on it, and then eventually 4. Those are families.
The moments where the engines for these next missions come to life is the culmination of years of work right here in the Magnolia State.
And I have a deep appreciation for what this thing does to start off with, but all of the things that have to happen, but most importantly, all the people that get up every day. We have some great technicians, great engineers, a great support staff all over this test facility that make this happen.
And the work goes beyond the test areas into places like the high-pressure industrial water facility. 10 massive diesel engines power pumps that provide water to Stennis's A and B test stands for fire protection and cooling from a 66 million gallon reservoir. The pumps generate 330,000 gallons of water per minute. The facility also contains 4 more diesel engines that generate emergency backup electrical power.
Each generator is 1,500 kW, so if we run in 2 of them, it's 3 meg of power we can put out.
What kind of power would that? What could you light up with that?
Probably a couple of neighborhoods.
A cool attitude in an environment where every person working on these tests strive daily for their best effort.
We're like a family. We're so small. Everybody knows everybody else, and everybody wants to help everybody else be successful. And we all are here to help get, the next astronauts on the moon. And Stennis is a part of that.
Now, part 3 of my Stennis series, we'll take a look at the next generation technology that'll play a key element of NASA's deep space missions. It's also being developed right here in the Magnolia State. That's tomorrow night at 10, right here on 16 WAPT News.
All this week, we are taking an exclusive inside look at Mississippi's Stennis Space Center and the critical role it's played in space exploration for more than 6 decades. In part 3 of his series, 16 WAPT's Troy Johnson tells us about new technology that's being developed at Stennis for NASA's long-range space missions.
Yeah, Keegan and Megan, behind me is the rover Curiosity. Its job is to explore Mars. It's on the red planet right now. But NASA is exploring so many more cool things full of tech to join it in the future, like a space outpost, a new vehicle, and upgrades to space capsules. NASA's Space Center in Hancock County is primarily known for decades of service as a rocket testing facility. As work continues on the Artemis missions,
And so at the top of the screen, what you'll see is a timeline.
Stennis's Autonomous Systems Lab is developing software to run critical systems on Gateway, an outpost in space that'll be about the size of a small studio apartment. Gateway will serve as a staging point for exploration of the moon and deep space, and its life support systems will have to function continuously.
Autonomous systems are really important because once we get beyond low Earth orbit, we're not going to be able to control from the ground. So what we manage to get into space, whether that's a spacecraft or a habitat on the moon or a lunar rover, It needs to be able to take care of itself without human intervention. Such a great job kind of integrating.
Laura Underwood is the project system manager for the lab. She tells me these systems will not only operate continuously, they'll learn to evolve.
The power system, the thermal system, the life support system, all of that has to be able to maintain and continue maintaining whether or not crew are there or not.
The Stennis lab won the Autonomous Manager contract for HALO, the living quarters and space station section of Gateway. They won it after creating software to run Stennis's high-pressure gas facility.
It maintains all the commodities that are used for rocket engine testing.
The gas house is essentially the heartbeat of the complex. It's never, ever closed.
The facility has been in operation since the onset of Stennis Space Center, integral part. So if anything ever happened in this place, we would be in trouble.
You can't have something failing in the middle of an engine test. So you have to know what's going on there at all times.
Go Starliner.
This next phase of American spaceflight is all about new technology. Starliner is a vehicle that will be heading into its second uncrewed test launch on July 30th. Astronaut Barry Butch Wilmore will command its first crewed launch about 6 months after that. The Navy captain tells me Starliner and Orion have a familiar look, but will serve different purposes.
Deep space, there's more shielding on Orion because it's going beyond the Van Allen belts that protects us from a lot of the nasty space radiation and all that's out there. So those are very striking differences, but like I said, in the visual, they look very similar.
The iconic capsule returning to space, and with upgrades in technology, they will be sustainable and reusable for several flights. And when they set foot back on the moon, astronauts will explore new areas for longer periods of time with pre-staged material, including rovers, science experiments, and living quarters. The data gleaned from the systems used on the moon will become the cornerstone for the development for the next phase of exploration, Mars.
And then in addition to that, you want to get kind of dive into more information about the systems.
And Stennis Autonomous Systems could become a key part of those missions, too. Now, looking ahead to part 4 of my Stennis series, Commercial Spaceflight. You might have heard about passengers traveling to space. A launch happened earlier this week, but the private sector is doing even bigger and bolder things. That's tomorrow night at 10, right here on 16 WAPT News.
All this week, 16 WAPT has been taking an in-depth look at the future of spaceflight and how the Stennis Space Center here in Mississippi is playing a crucial role.
Tonight, 16 WAPT's Troy Johnson is here to take a look at commercial spaceflight and how companies are creating new vehicles and broadening access to the cosmos. Troy.
Yeah, Keegan and Megan, if you're one of those people who want to experience the unknown, hey, it may not be out of the question. We're getting closer and closer to space tourism.
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
For more than 5 decades, space exploration has been controlled by the handful of countries able to send vehicles into space. But that is rapidly changing. Within a matter of days of each other, billionaires Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos both launched their own privately financed vehicles to the edge of space, marking the beginning of passenger spaceflight.
And that's what the Commercial Crew Program, that's the natural evolution of spaceflight, that would happen, that we get companies that would full up build the spacecraft, be responsible for them with some government oversight and requirements, and then they would sell them to the government. And that's what's taking place.
And our first view of Butch Wilmore.
Astronaut Butch Wilmore's NASA career spans 2 decades and started with a shuttle mission and more.
Who would ever dreamed I would be sitting on a Russian rocket leaving the planet, right? Go to the space station, command the space station, do spacewalks.
And now he's set to command the first human flight of Starliner, a reusable vehicle built by Boeing for NASA's Commercial Crew Program.
And to be able to command that and be a part of that, all the development and the process of going into an experimental flight test, it's fascinating and a great opportunity, and I'm honored to have that opportunity and excited about it.
He tells me in the coming years, the Commercial Crew Program will get more astronauts rides to low orbit and to the ISS. Companies big and small are building components for SLS and Orion, as well as micro payloads. Science experiments a little larger than a shoebox, tucked into the Orion spacecraft's stage adapter. An out-of-this-world opportunity to experiment in space.
Small micro to CubeSat type payloads afford an opportunity for universities as well as companies to, dip their toe into or perform research in a space environment.
So that's why we applaud people like SpaceX and Blue Origin on their activities, even though it's low Earth orbit that they're playing with right now. Eventually, they're working on getting a piece of the pie, per se, of being able to support the space program.
Robinson says those and many other companies have worked or are working on their projects at Stennis. A lot of dreams, innovations, and creativity.
Just to think that we would get to the point where a normal, everyday traveler can actually go to the very limits of space or to the very edge of space from Earth and return back safely. It's been achieved now.
And Captain Wilmore expects even more non-professional astronauts to experience the unknown elements of space sooner than you may think.
The lack of apparent gravity and the floating and all that type of stuff, just that aspect of being able to experience that is fascinating to all of us, or most all of us. My wife isn't fascinated about it, but most of us are.
Well, there is so much more for you to learn about Stennis, and you can do it up close. The NASA Stennis Visitor Center is open. It's housed in the Infinity Science Center in Pearlington on the Gulf Coast, and you'll be able to see the engines tested in the Magnolia State for Artemis 1, light up with that first mission launch from the Kennedy Space Center on November 22nd. Troy Johnson, 16 WAPT News.